Hey everyone, I hope you are having an awesome day. Today, we're going to be answering the most frequently asked question that I get as a photographer, and that is, what camera and lens do I use when I shoot sports photography? Hey everyone, my name is Jason and I am a sports photographer here in Ohio. Thank you for tuning into the channel. If this is your first time here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe down below. That helps me out as a content creator, gets my channel and videos out to more people, and I would truly appreciate it. And get into the video. The most common question I get as a photographer is, hey, what camera do you use to shoot sports videos? Now, disclaimer, before I tell you what I use, this does not mean you have to use this camera or this lens to be a sports photographer. I started off on something that was much smaller, much less of a price, and did not have the capabilities that my camera does now. All that matters is that you get out there and shoot, and you learn every single time you go, and you get better the next time you show up. So don't let what I'm about to tell you stop you from starting to become a sports photographer. Get out there, go shoot, learn, and then go back and try it again. Now, the question is, what camera do I use? Well, we can break this down into two categories. First, the body that I use is a Sony A1. This camera, when it first came out, was marketed for sports photographers and wildlife photographers. Well, this camera shoots up to 30 frames per second. As a sports photographer, that means you will never miss the shot, assuming you get it in focus and you're in the right position. This camera also features some really fast autofocus, and I've never really known a Sony camera that hasn't performed well in low light. Depending on the sports that you shoot, I do a lot of high school, and the lights at the high school stadiums don't tend to be the best. So this camera does really well in low light situations. What else do I love about this camera? Well, it features dual card slots. That means when I take the photo, I will not only have one copy of the photo, but I'll have two copies of the photo. It writes incredibly fast when using the right memory cards, and that saves me as a photographer, knowing that I have a backup immediately once I take the photo. One other thing to consider about this camera is that if you shoot video as well, this camera is set up to flip back and forth very easy. I use these custom button settings on top of the camera, and I'm able to go from photo to video mode incredibly fast. This camera can shoot 60 frames per second, it can shoot in 4K, it can even shoot at 120 frames per second in full HD, which is incredibly awesome for what I do. Now, the camera is not everything. The other very important thing that you have to decide on is what lens that you will use. Now, when it comes to what lens I use, it depends on what sport I'm shooting, and it also depends on what time of day I'm shooting that photo at. So if you look here, I have a 200 to 600 millimeter lens, and this lens is great for anything that's done while the sun is up. So it doesn't do well in low light, but during the day, this lens can reach all over the field. So in football, I can reach from one end zone to the other. In baseball, it's great for reaching the outfielders. And in soccer, it is really exceptional because I can go from one end to the other end, capture the goalie, and the photo will turn out amazing. Now, why would I not use this lens in low light or when the sun goes down? That is because this lens has an aperture of 5.6 to 6.3. That means I'm not able to open up the aperture like the other lens I'm going to show you, which is a 2.8. That means when I'm inside and the lights are low, I am not going to be able to keep my shutter speed up and get a nice clean image. In other words, I'll have to bump my ISO up in order to get a nice, well-exposed image. Now, the other lens that I use is a 70-200 2.8 lens. This lens is a beast, and I use it for pretty much everything. I use it when the sun's up, I use it when the sun's down, I use it indoors, and I use it outdoors. This is probably the lens that you're going to see the most on the sidelines, you're going to see other photographers using, and it's a great all-around lens. It's great for any sports. I use it for football, softball, basketball. I use it for baseball. I use it for track and field. Really, any sport, you can't go wrong with the 70-200. Now, as you can see, I've combined the two things. I put the lens on the camera, and it's a relatively lightweight, compact setup. This does depend on what brand you shoot on though. So I know older Sony lenses can be quite heavy. If you go with an off-brand lens, maybe something like a Tamron, that lens is much heavier. I used to have a Sigma 70-200, and that's the lens I started off shooting sports on, and that lens compared to this lens is incredibly heavier. Now, when I combine the two together, it makes it really easy. If I have a strap, I'll let the camera hang by my side while I'm just walking around or in between plays, and then when I'm ready to shoot, I can quickly pull the camera up and get the shot. Now, one of the things that is easily overlooked is memory cards. I prefer to use these Lexar Professional memory cards. I've used them pretty much from the beginning, and they really haven't done me wrong. When I shoot, I like to use these silver ones. They are the 250 megabyte write speed, and they tend to keep up with that 30 frames per second. Sometimes after a play, when I hold the shutter button down to make sure I get the shot, it can take a little bit of time to clear the buffer in the camera, which means write all of the photos to the memory card, but these silver ones tend to catch up. If you go anything less, the 30 frames per second tends to bog down on the camera, and you don't want to be sitting there waiting for the camera to write to the memory card when there's something you should be photographing out in front of you. Now, these are the 64 gigabyte cards. These are awesome, and I like the speed of them. However, when I shoot a full sporting event, I like to grab the 128 gigabyte cards. That gets me just over 1,000 photos, and it tends to be enough to cover pretty much the game from the start to the end. Now, like I mentioned before, you definitely do not need this setup to get started. Grab a camera, grab a lens. It doesn't matter what camera it is. It doesn't matter what lens it is. The key is to get out on the sideline and start shooting photos. So that's what I use. Let me know what you use down below. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can also check out my website where I have personalized one-on-one coaching to help you get better at photography. We'll see you in the next one.